Well, I've heard it been described as some scientists even say that we could be living in a computer simulation. And with this X factor that you're talking about, Doc, that we can't explain, is that a possibility in your opinion?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, I've seen those arguments on we're living in a matrix, a holographic universe where we're, a bunch of batteries laying out in a big warehouse, with so much power coming out of each body, electromagnetics, whatever. That part is probably true. On the other part, there is a thing called the different forms of joy. We talked about love. Earlier in my life, I talked about the Greek had 4 different ways of levels of relationship of what love was. You had your eros, philo, agape, and telema or thelema, the love of will. Now, with that said, the same thing occurs in joy and bliss states. We have happy, and then we have bliss, which is usually achieved through meditation and achieving certain brain states where the brain bifurcates into a pattern form that allows bliss states. That's Persinger's work. And then we have the next level, which is joy. Now, joy is going to be your barter chip. That is, your joy is what you have to barter in the human race that no one else has got. And that's what makes you valuable as part of the sum total.
You see, I could say possibly that's even why whoever built this construct actually built it. Maybe joy and love are things that we can't experience outside of this simulation.
My joy right now, giving you a metaphor, so I can try to give it to you the way it's appearing for me, is to watch projects that I started 40 years ago, construct of a book or a concept of something or other, and then 40 years later watching a closure on it, where there's the book. The power tools and things like that I did 35, almost 40 years ago. ESP was 40 years ago. I used to teach courses on that. A book just only came out. Imagine the fact that, right now, I did 4 books this last year. I have 10 new books ready for press, and I haven't even begun to show you what I've got.
And Doc, this is going to sound absolutely insane, but with you having had a glimpse so far down your own future path, do you then come back with these books already written in your memory?
Something like that. That's pretty much, I can't explain to you the difference between your words and mine, but that's accurate in a sense of knowing the flow, where I'm no longer struggling. It is being given as a gift.
Well, I'd like to picture it as, even if we're on a river, you've somehow managed to jump forward in the river and then sailed back up it. And on the way back up to where you are just now, you've gathered all that information and it's just there for you to recall. But again,
that's seemingly what my eidetic memory is about. And I'm able to connect dots, wonderfully now. However, one of the things I have absolutely also discovered is connecting dots is arbitrary. That's 5 space. That's where that goes. That's what that part is about. It's the way you time travel, is the way you do your duration of your consciousness. That is what time is. That's Robert Ornstein, Psychology of Consciousness.
And I've heard it said as well that geometric shapes are quite important when it comes to time travel as well. Would you like to talk on that?
Hey, Doc, before you get into that, I just want to put out, folks, that if you go to richardallenmiller.com, you can check out everything that the Doc has to offer. You can check out his books and also buy the books right there on the website. So make sure you go there, check it out. If you're interested in what you hear today, and believe me, we're just getting started.
And I must apologize because I actually forgot we were in a show there. I'm pestering the Doc. I'm interrogating him here. And then actually seen, we're live, Doc. I apologize,
and that's great.
Man.
But but seriously, folks, make sure you go to richardallenmiller.com. Check it out. There's so much information on there. Unbelievable. But yeah, we got about a minute left, so I don't want you to have to get too far into that. If you want, Kev, we can always.
No, that's okay. We can. How do we do it? Stay tuned, fans. Same bat channel.
Yes.
Yeah,
no.
Same Batman.
Joe, get with the script. The show's
I'm getting
finished.
with the damn
The show's
script.
been
No,
finished. I know how it goes.
oh, this is it's unbelievable information and conversation that's going on. I mean, just on the intellectual level, this is one of the best broadcasts so far that I've heard, especially on this subject. So, I mean, if you wonder why I'm being quiet, I'm kind of taking it all in. So it's just good stuff, Doc. It's always good to have you.
It's my pleasure, because I do like to talk about time travel, and I have not even begun to talk about how you can do it. And I've written a book. There are 3 books unpublished called The Diamond Body, Electromagic, and Yogatronics. And some of them are on the internet, so you can find them. My ex-wife, Iona Miller, co-authored these things with me, and they're part of the studies I did for the military.
Cool.
Okay, we're almost at the end of this section, folks. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after the break with Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Wow, don't go anywhere.
What a treat.
Didn't touch that dial.
Oh, welcome everybody to hour number 2 of Freaky Friday right here on Truth Frequency Radio, truthfrequencyradio.com. I'm Joe Joseph. It goes down as a first, I don't know, it was Marty paying attention?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, Marty, make sure, do me a big favor. Make sure you get a good sound clip of that. Doc, I got to tell you, you are the first one on the Freedom Link and or Freaky Friday or anywhere else to take a bong rip like that on the air. Oh, it's beautiful, man.
Class. That was class.
Mike was off. Sorry about that. You want to see me kiss it? I have a Mad Hatter hat with all the orange hair, and I'm licking my SARK 2P 9mm. Just for fun.
Now that's a visual.
That's a visual. I've got that picture I could forward to you. That's a creepy visual.
Holy moly.
Someone sent me a Mad Hatter hat. It was great. It's right out of, it's like a Johnny Depp hat. Wonderful.
Wow. Hey, so do me a favor. Tell me a little bit about your greencarebotanicals.com, that website.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting individual. He's up on Thompson Creek. He's doing a legal grow. He's got a legal grow. It's all legal here in Oregon now. There's good things and bad things about that. There's a movement. He's the one that put me on his site there at that Green Care Botanical, because it's going to be legal. Up in Washington, they held the first auctions where all the different compassion centers could bid against, crops and things like that. Myself, I would rather not see it be recreational, because that's about revenue. That's money. That's why they're doing it. The real reason, it will stop research like it did on tobacco and alcohol. And what I now feel is that medical marijuana is absolutely way more valuable as a pharmaceutical than it is for a recreational, let's go out and get high.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, to be honest with you, it's definitely more therapeutic in nature.
Well, and then there's some studies about children and memory. And so for me, it's not so much about pain for me. Actually, what it does for me is that because I'm rocking in my chair, I'm humming to myself. I am a true functioning idiot savant. I'm a true functioning idiot savant. And what marijuana does for me is it makes me more normal. Like I'm able to hold thoughts longer. I'm able to express. I'm very circular. And so it helps me become.
Is it more like a focus type of thing?
Yeah,
it helps you focus?
Makes me a little more linear, and being able to come to time travel and remembering that.
Wow, unbelievable. So I guess, what are you, a consultant on this, on this project?
I did, and my first job out of graduate school for the Boeing company, working for the military, was Lunar Base Alpha 1. I was the physicist in charge of light. and we were growing pot on the moon. That's a High Times interview with me, Tom Lytle, in 1992, February 1992, growing pot on the moon. It's got an astronaut running across the lunar surface carrying a bell jar with marijuana in it. And that was the studies we did in 1970. And that's when we were working with polyploids, and I was working with pure strain indica and working at high altitudes. I'm going to give you something that's not in the books just to give you a little taste of the research that hasn't even been in print yet.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the techniques on was called Acapulco Gold, where you would take a black muslin ball, sack, and black muslin around a given bud that was going to be harvested in 2 weeks. And what it would do is stress the chlorophyll from the sunlight being blocked. It could still breathe and all of that, but because of the blockage of the sunlight, it created what they called Acapulco Gold. That is a technique in changing the tumble of cannabinoids by stressing the plant. You have 60 cannabinol radicals, and ones are soporific and the others are psychoactive. And so, some make you fall asleep, some make you hallucinate. They have a complex of these in all the different plants in terms of the way the tumble comes in a Gaussian distribution. What my job was to see if I could change the tumble of cannabinoids, skewing the curve over toward psychoactive to make high-end creepy things that was originally called Sammamish Slough. That was the first cultivars that came out, or clones, before Trainwreck, White Widow, and the usual suspects out of Amsterdam. Now, when we were doing this in 1969,
yeah,
that was like a fairly early year, I decided I wanted to experiment with xenon microwave band. I had a big Klystron tube, and I nuked this one plant.
Get out of here.
I'm sorry, I'm going to tell you what I did. I nuked this plant for 10 seconds in 3 times over a day and a half period. And what it would do to the plant.
Were you trying to get like cellular mutation, Doc?
No, I was searing the first layer of epidermal on this plant so that it turned white. And then I would blow carbon dioxide across that leaf, and it would so stress the plant that it changed the cannabinoids. And it was like doing Acapulco Gold, only instead of doing it with black muslin balls, you did it with microwave band. And that was one of the studies that was never put in the original book on marijuana that was by Murphy Stevens. Steve Murphy owned this indoor sun shop, was an old buddy of mine. And so he morphed his name to Murphy Stevens. And then his younger brother eventually wrote one on, growing marijuanas in hydroponics. But Steve's work had that leaf with the two ladybugs bowling each other on one on top of the other. That was his old original book on that. That was all bowling studies. And basically, nobody knew how to do it before that moment. There was up in Kathmandu places where the military sent me to learn how they did it, in terms of making charas and temple ball. The original studies were to take a high-end thing that we could literally grow in space. And hemp was as important to fiber as any of the other 5. We had 6 crops that we were working, flax and some others. And hemp was one of them, and I used indica. And we discovered some very interesting things about wavelength cycles in different cycles of the plant that have led now to agronomy things that are really important in medicine. But it all started at Boeing. And, where we were looking at how light would affect the plant. The halogens are just, longer UV, but, there you can go on up into the microwave band. And
what would you, Doc, what would you say, like, especially people in medicinal states, and there are more and more of them across the United States, where you're allowed to grow, like, say, 8 or 10 of your own plants. What would you suggest, for all those trying to grow out there, like the best light setup, or how would they go about getting the best? And can you give any suggestions?
Well, I like herbal pharmacies because when the grid collapses, where are you going to get your heart medicine?
Hawthorn root berry extract or
Well,
something?
no, there's all kinds of steroids, yams, Mexican yams, your chemistries. I write whole books on that subject in the Encyclopedia of Alternative Agriculture. I think the herbal pharmacy is possibly one of the most important crops you could put into your garden, hemp being just one of them, not 6 plants, but you only need a couple of them to pollinate. Fact is, you can pollinate with a Q-tip if you're really clever. In fact, you don't even have to do it that way. The correct way is germplasm and taking tissue culture. That would be the way I would do it. And I would put it inside, because who knows what's falling out of the skies. You can clean the top of your roof of radioactive debris if you'd like, but it's a bitch getting it out of your smoke.
That's
I don't think it made any sense. I'm trying to abbreviate. We have, if you go to the Nuclear Emergency Tracking Center.com, NETC.com, that'll show you what's happening at any given moment, anywhere. And you'll notice there's lots of RADCON 3 level alerts going on hither and yon and in the United States because of particulate coming out of the stratosphere from Fukushima. But if you want to really look at a creepy thing, go look at Japan right now. It's lit up like a Christmas tree. And when I say that...
Oh, yeah, no, I see that. Yeah, absolutely, right.
It's creepy. And every day, every minute, they have RADCON 4, RADCON 5 level alerts, where we're getting a RADCON 3 hither and yon. Now, I wouldn't want to be in Japan for nothing. And I think most people don't realize how exposed they are just flying in an aircraft. And I'm not even talking about Fukushima and the stratosphere full of plutonium and cesium-137. I'm talking about cosmic gamma rays that are not being absorbed by the atmosphere. And that when you're up high in an aircraft, anywhere, your exposure ratio is like going through an airport with 20 X-rays, not 2, 20. And most people never even realize that, how dangerous flight is.
So, Doc, when are we actually going to start seeing like flight attendants and things like that? When are we going to start seeing them suffering from flying through this? Because it's obviously elevated right now.
I know. I watch how it must affect individuals like flight captains and things like that. Certainly, they're not going to have any normal children, and I'm guessing thyroid. Flying with small children is dangerous because their thyroid is not developed enough to be protecting them. And that's what we're seeing in Japan right now. When I originally wrote the article for Kerry Cassidy, there was a 28% anomaly in the children under 6 with thyroid irregularities. And now that figure has gone up to 48%. There is a gag order. For me, talking about it like I am right now would be against the law in Japan. And so as a reporter that would go to Japan and try to get the news, the individual whistleblower would be immediately put in jail. And that is how bad Japan is. And nobody is talking about that because Japan is like Japan. It's in my opinion, it's a tragedy of man when you watch something like Greece or Atlantis fade from history. And Japan is the same with their shogun and their ritualization of presenting food, the ritualizing of it. Its culture is rich. They have ritual suicide, different than the Neptune Club, Harry Carey, where some haku. And the idea of committing suicide because you did not do the right thing. All of us know what the right thing is. And so once we fall into that place of purpose, everything flows from there. That's how you know what you're supposed to be doing. It's how easy it is.
And Doc, when you look at Fukushima, in your opinion, is this an extinction level event if we keep on doing nothing about it?
Yeah. Well, that's what the algorithms are saying. I don't know. I can tell you that the NASA documents, the Future Weapons of War, the War After Next, that document says so. The algorithms that the military uses for listening to chatter on the internet, like Cliff High's, infobots.
The web bot. Yeah.
Yeah, well, here's the deal. That's why Kurzweil is so popular, and the Avatar program is next, with transhumanism into the Avatar program. And right now, we've got Avatar 1s. And so there it is. Read it and weep.
Well, Doc, this wouldn't have happened if they would have left Fukushima or built it on the actual level it was supposed to be in, because I think they took it down about 25 feet from where it was originally.
I don't know what actually happened over there. I can tell you that General Electric's Daiichi-like structures are supposed to be the cleanest in the world, i.e. there are no spent plutonium rods. What was that about? Well, my guess is it was weapons-grade plutonium, and they got their pants cut down at the wrong moment.
Yeah.
And it has now put the world in risk. And all of the Daiichi-like plants are leaking now. They're all old. Every single one of them is over 20 years old. And so Columbia River is contaminated from Hanford. That's probably what.
Oh yeah, they're still burying stuff out there.
I'm sorry?
I said they're still burying stuff out there.
No, it's leaking into the Columbia River now.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is they still continue to store spent fuel there.
Well, imagine what the Germans are doing. They do it for Europe by putting it into Africa. And then we can look at all the sickness going on over there.
Right.
And who knows what it is.
What? There was a movie about that, wasn't there?
Well, it's important for me to say that the same symptoms for Ebola are exactly the same for radiation sickness. And that is where Germany's been burying their plutonium for the last 20 years for Europe.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I've got pictures of trains coming out of France, going into Germany. Now, it is important to realize that waste management is run by mafias in our country.
Right.
Okay. That's okay. Certain, group thing where there's a constant waste pile that's growing into a mountain. So that would be the Yakuza doing cleanup for TEPCO. Now, with that said, why is the Yakuza doing it? It's because nobody else can force anybody in there to give up their life. It's like they were paying people to go in with the idea that when they died, their family would benefit. And there were a bunch of those. How about all those Navy sailors that died? The whole thing is a mess. And there is no oversight or due diligence. There is no accurate reporting. And now there is a radiation cloud up in the stratosphere like the Van Allen belt. Now we have another one to have to go through. There's absolutely anything going through those things, they're not going to have babies. It's radiation exposure is creepy. And we have no way to defend that. And then enter the fullerene and the possibilities of having something that will cure radiation sickness. How's that work? Well, I wrote an article on that, and that's the new fullerene buckyball that they put exclusion zone water in it. However, while this is an amazing new antioxidant that forms nanotubes that go on and isolate heavy metals and ionizing radiation in the body, and they're feeding, this is a duplicated report now in 5 different studies that I've seen, where they give lethal doses of radiation to the rat, feed it fullerene water, and there's a 95% recovery. Now, it's a super antioxidant. But guess what? Instead of putting exclusion zone water inside it, let's put some deuterium or tritium in and see what happens next. And what they have is a thing called a neutron fullerene fusion bomb.
Good Lord.
I have the patent. I wrote the article. It is the darker side. Now, here we have a new technology, probably the most important technology this century. And instead, like nuclear energy, instead of using it for medicine, we're going to use it as a weapon of war. Now, what's wrong with that picture? And that's when you realize the function concept of statism and a president that could tell you to go over to Syria and kill someone you don't know.
Yeah.
And you can't say no because he's the one in power. And to realize that even him isn't real because there are corporations and pork barrel politics going on.
Of course there are.
That is transnational. And we have virtual countries now, and we have lost. Obama just gave our Second Amendment rights away to the United Nations, which I will affectionately call the New World Order. And that means if we have a riot anywhere in the United States, they have a right to suspend our Second Amendment.
Well, they can try.
Well, that's awfully Red Dawn of you. I don't think it's going to work that way. Well, the way it's working for me is I'm watching China take over all of Canada's utilities. And that's what Bundy Ranch was about. There's a China wanting to do a big solar panel thing in there where a bunch of cattlemen were, and they got congressmen involved, where for the first time in my life, I have worked with BLM, Bureau of Land Management, for, 25 years. And I've never seen an armored vehicle in any of their storerooms or houses. How did they get a gun?
I knew. I pegged you. You're really Bundy, aren't you?
And worse than that, who knows who's in the crowd with you?
Exactly.
Well, in Ukraine, they found both Ukrainian and Russian shot with the same rifle. How's that work?
Wow.
Get ripped. The whole thing is a bunch of false flags. None of it.
Of course.
None of it.
You mean the turtle story wasn't correct?
I'm sorry?
Remember they said it was all about saving the desert tortoise?
Oh, the desert tortoise. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's like our spotted owl. The whole thing is a false flag. It's not real. And the real problem is when you uncover some of the rock, and the bugs are running around. There's more rocks. There's more layers. You'll never know what the real truth is. Convoluted. It's our news reporting today. It's worse than Nazi Germany was during the war. And nobody gets it. And worse, the alternative radio is just as weirdness out there. I am encountering, there's very few people like me just trying to say it as it is. And I know I don't know. I know also that I'll never probably know. But I do know, I've been to Antarctica and I know that exists. How does that work? It's not in any history book I read.
No. That's my point. I don't know. Here's the thing, Doc. Let me just interject for a second and say that you're right. Basically since the mainstream media was bought by J.P. Morgan early in the 20s, and even before that, I mean, there was media control, but just not to that extent.
Al Jazeera was bought by Fox.
By Fox.
Yeah. David Icke and his shows with with Duncan Rhodes and what they're trying to do in alternative news reporting, it's infiltration and greed.
Well said, Doc.
Well said. And
I don't have a clue what's real anymore. I'm trying to. I will support Duncan. I don't know David Icke. I know Duncan Rhodes. He doesn't look like an alien to me.
And
I was actually at a UFO conference in Laughlin, and I watched my friend Sir Lawrence Gardner go up on stage, and there were 20 hecklers that were calling him a reticulan. Now, it doesn't matter whether they believe it or not. What right do they have of interfering with all the other people that were there, purposefully trying to hear what this man had to say?
That's exactly why they're there, though, Doc. They're just there to instigate and to actually kill the information.
Terrorism, it's a missed flag, and really, what we really want now is clarity on what's important. What's important to you, Joe? Is it your family? Is it your children? We need to actually get into the center of what's really, really important to us, because that's where the real joy is and where your value has real meaning to me. That's what you have to barter, your joy. And that's going to be your survival out when the grid collapses. And if you remember my words and follow what you love to do, you can be, what is this, radio? You can be a John Connor. There you go, radio,
Yeah.
Mars or whatever. Okay, all hail Eris. Look, follow your joy and you can't go wrong. You will evolve. Absolutely.
That's amazing info, Doc. Let me tell you something, and you're right. A lot of people say, "Well, I can't do this. I'm just one person." The hell you can't. You've got so much power within you that a lot of people say, "Well, everybody sells themselves short." We do. We live in boxes, basically little boxes, and to get out of that box, you gotta change the way you think. You gotta change the way that you perceive reality. You really do. And when you change it and you start doing like you say, Doc, follow what you love. Follow what gives you joy. You do that.
That is, they have old shamanism tribes, American Indian, and I think Aborigines used to do this as well in Australia. They would watch a child and determine what it was best suited for in terms of serving the tribe. And that would become the skill. That person might be a hunter, it might be a cook, a lot of different things.
Right.
Now,
we got to go to break, Doc. Let's go to break, and when we come back, one more segment with Dr. Richard Allen Miller, so don't go away, folks. Welcome back, everybody. Joe Joseph here. You're listening to the Freedom Link, hour number 2 of 3 of Freaky Friday, right here on Truth Frequency Radio, truthfrequencyradio.com. And let me tell you, our special guest tonight, one of the best ones we've ever had, if not the best on Freaky Friday this Friday, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. RichardAllenMiller.com is his website. And if you like what you hear, you're going to love what you read. So make sure you go to his website, check out his books, order some books, and educate yourself, especially the ones about, time travel and the ESP. I mean, unbelievable subject matter across a vast array of subjects. So RichardAllenMiller.com, man, I'll tell you, just fantastic information. And Doc, we were talking about the fullerene fusion bomb there, but question for you, why do you believe, based on your knowledge, is longitudinal EM weapons, are they being employed, and are they as destructive as, say, Tesla put out first, with cracking the earth in half and things like that? Would you are those weapons at their disposal? And if so, then why would they resort to nukes?
I'm not sure how to answer. I'm going to be meeting with Judy Wood in February in Lebanon, Missouri. And she's suggesting there is a new energy beam weapon that had been used on Building 7 at 9/11. I can tell you that what my studies indicate is that there was a Mossad weapon, which was a neutron bomb, and it was given to the United States and studied at both MIT and Livermore with the National Ignition Facility in Livermore. I have written papers on this, including the patent of 2003. So the patent came out 3 years later, but basically what a fullerene is a 60 carbon atoms that so structure in relationship to each other that it forms a ball. And that ball is 1.4 nanometers. It's real small. And the spaces between the two carbon atoms are just wide enough to allow the inclusion of water, H2O, and other forms of water. The water has several phases called ortho and para water. These are levorotary, where the dipole moment is going in that direction as opposed to that direction. There is a ratio of para to ortho water that can be separated now using specific light bands, and can actually, by hitting the water, will cause the ortho to go over this direction and the para to go over there. And then there are isotopes, including deuterium and tritium. And then there are the next level, which Kerry Reams called activated water, which was H703 with a free radical ion. It's where 3 water molecules bonded together and formed a structure and released an ion so it could do something. Now, what we have with carbon forming a fullerene or buckyball, what that is the strongest structure in the world that we know of. It is at least 100 times stronger than diamond in that carbon form. And when it forms nanotubes, it is now a type of material that they're talking about making the space elevator in Japan, going into the space station. That's what
right.
Right. Okay. So
Wow.
that's nanotubes, and what you do is you get a whole bunch of fullerene molecules, activated charcoal in a specific form. It bonds. You can make balls with 60 carbon atoms. You can do it with 70 carbon atoms. You can do it with 120 carbon atoms. One that's most interesting is 60, the small one. And now the smallest one is the strongest one. And that one is what we call a Buckminster fullerene ball. And was named after Buckminster Fuller, who originated. Actually, he didn't. Actually, the guy that invented that was Bob Marshall, working for Buckminster Fuller. He conceived the idea of a vector equilibrium matrix, which is a 3-pointed triangle that has a mathematical anomaly where the center can't exist. And what we have now is a kind of mini black hole or torus twistor space or cavitation process where the inside becomes the outside. It's a topological surface. It's a mathematical.
Is that very similar to the work of Marco Rodin and the Rodin coil?
No, I don't know that work, or Bendini and some of the others like that. I am going to guess that cold fusion has many forms. This one was discovered from dolphin in a thing called sonoluminescence, where they were blowing these little microwave balls, and they were balls of water with air inside it that cavitated, and when it broke to the surface, would give off white light, like cold fusion. There was more energy inside. Why? Where did it come from? The process is called cavitation, and they're now looking at another new concept called super cavitation, which is even more uniquely different. This is mostly based on Roger Penrose's work from Princeton and the idea of the difference between Hawking's and his black hole, white hole concept, and Roger Penrose and his torus twistor space. Now, to understand this better, if you were to take a circular drum, it has to be circular because we're talking about 3 dimensions. And so by circular, that means that all surfaces are from the same distance, kind of thing. And you put a latex glove over it, that's space. And then if you put a big baseball in the center of it, that's the sun. As it bends space, it creates gravity in terms of the way mass is attracted to itself in bent space. Now that is what the Higgs boson and all that stuff is about, is to give us the particle physics that will explain how this all works. The problem is, with quantum mechanics, your measurements are in space-time. And with that comes the uncertainty principle, that the more you know about one thing, the less you know about something else. And since, well, no, that's how it works.
Right,
and,
right. No, I know. It's crazy.
Okay. So with different molecules, it's different.
Okay.
Because the carbon molecule is way larger than a water molecule. And when I say molecule, I mean more than one atom. And so, water is the first molecule that has a dipole moment. And it's that dipole moment that makes it so important in what we call structured water, because the relationship of storing information in an array out of water is 1,000,000 times, that's 6 zeros, more efficient than the current way we do it with gallium arsenide in what we call forbidden zones as opposed to exclusion zones. Now, this is a point of resolution in information, and that's where a holographic system now becomes more fruitful in terms of resolution of the information that you're getting. That's what you have now. Instead of entanglement and decoherence, what you have now is information and resolution of information. And depending on where you are at the size of resolving, the next scale up has its own level and relationship, just like Mandelbrot, Julia, and May patterns do in their generator systems. Now, we've only discovered 3 of those so far. The math would suggest that we're going to find newer algorithms in terms of relationship of one thing to another. When I was at MIT, I took a course called Fluidic Devices. And what we were doing was a next generation of computers using Schmidt triggers and switches, using fluidic devices, which were more impervious to gamma rays in outer space. In other words, they would work a lot better, and we could make them smaller than we could with integrated circuits. Later, when we got into gallium and arsenic and we put those 2 surfaces together, the register of dissimilarity in relationship with the first structuring of atoms between them, called the forbidden zone, were the relationship of where we store information in our checksum error systems. Now, in the water, it's like 1,000,000 times smaller, and it does a more accurate job. Water could be where, that's what Mark Leclerc at MIT is suggesting, and it's a metaphor of how God appears on earth.
Really?
And well, that's Mark Leclerc. He's got cavitation. You got to watch his videos; they're interesting.
Yeah,
And,
no, that's a fascinating concept.
well, it is, like, I find it extremely interesting.
Yeah.
That dimethyltryptamine, which is an extremely important brain hormone, gives you a sense of God, the brain drug, Rick Strassman, and yet it's found in the most commonest plants like crabgrass. It's like it's a delivery system from God. Can't miss it. It's there. You just reach down and you have it. Now, when you look at the universe this way, there's actually something more going on, and you're beginning to realize that you're really not human. You're basically only about 10% human, and the rest of you is a habitat. And really, you're coexisting with a whole bunch of entities that collectively would be called John and Joe and Kev.
And Doc, is that why they say we only really utilize about 10% of our brain at any one time, or do they just not understand it?
Well, that's the cerebral cortex in terms of activation and measuring it with electronics. If you use that metaphor, the orca has a cerebral cortex that's twice the size of yours, and that mammal is firing 60% of it. What do you think that suggests? Now, that mammal is God, that is going places you will never conceive of. You're not capable or designed well enough to do that. And I don't know, the dolphin, who are lower on the food chain, are using cold fusion right now as part of their play in art, blowing these little circles and play with them and whatever they do with them. And we've discovered that it's a form of cold fusion. It's called cavitation, and I'm going to give you a metaphor right now. I have a big pool of water, and a drop of water, solid water, comes straight down and hits into the pool. What happens next is a series of waves go out in resonance, to the weight of the drop, how big the drop was, the size of the drum, blah, 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 blah. Physics. Now, the fact is, there's also a set of waves that go inward. And what happens is, when the ball hits, it's like the waves slap each other, and they fall and form a bubble around air. And that's called cavitation. When a screw from a submarine is going through the water, there is a group of bubbles behind it that are actually exclusion zone water trapping basically air inside it. And the air is turning inside out like a topological surface.
Really?
That
so
is,
that's cold fusion.
yes, it is.
Wow. Unbelievable.
It's as simple as that. And it's all around us in terms of the way a wave. In one of my papers, I actually have the mathematics laid out on the fusion reaction going on inside a fullerene, and then I show the same reaction in the energy of a wave across the shore. Now, water behaves differently when it touches something else, and each something else it touches, it reacts differently. So you automatically have a register of that molecule touching plastic. There's no surface tension. If you had it with indium, it would crawl right up the side of that bottle and probably right over the side of it. It would crawl because of the surface tension being so strong in the relationship of one thing to another with cold fusion. It would have the energy to move up as a water beam and up over the cup. And that's Dr. Jerry Pollack. It showed that in his exclusion zone water and the fourth phase of water. Now, I will remind you all that water actually has 18 phases.
Well, you'd have to, in order to remind me, I would have to know that first, Doc. And I'll tell you what, I had no idea. Now, I knew that I knew that water responded to certain frequencies more than others.
I mean, sonoluminescence and the idea of harmonics, That
right.
But it's in the structure of where the water is too. Waves are a function of what's going on around them, the depth below it, because the wave is actually three-dimensional, has some other components to it that will allow for other kinds of things. What makes water interesting is it's one of the few things in nature that does not compress. And so you have complete transfer of information from one point to another through water. Now, that's more efficient system of sound than what we currently use with air, dolphin. And you know that dolphin, I just saw last week that dolphin have actual names for themselves. They're unique names, just like we do. I think there's intelligence all around us and we don't have a clue yet.
Absolutely. I'm going to give you a quick example. When I moved into my house about 4 years ago, and I went from being a city slicker to living way out in the boondocks. So, and one of the things that you find, Doc, is a lot of feral cats, right? So, I guess one of the guys, my closest neighbor's about a quarter mile away. So I guess he had a mouse problem and he bought a couple of cats and tried to get rid of the mouse problem. Didn't happen. He threw them outside. Well, he didn't get them fixed. So now there's a feral cat colony. But I've seen their social structure. And I actually am starting to understand how they communicate with one another. Not so much like, hey, Marv, hey, John.
Male. Yeah.
What's that?
Cats have a dominant male form. You want to be really careful. Down here, a feral cat can kill itself from salmonella. And it's a terrible, terrible way to die. And so there is a humane responsibility sometimes regarding the trimming of I think that's what the New World Order is doing to us.
There's no doubt. Well, there's no doubt. But let me tell you something. There's a social structure within the colony, if you will. And I get to see it. I get to watch it in real time and how they interact. Let me also give you an example, just to show you, how they feel. They know emotion is. We had a couple of kittens born, and one morning there were body parts on my, out in the driveway. It looks like a predator went and got it and tore it apart. So we went and buried it in we have like a little pet cemetery of all these feral cats that either got sick and you got to put down or they just pass away or predators get to them. And so we buried this, these pieces of kitten, if you will, and the mom the mother cat who knows, we provide for them, we feed them, and we do things to take care of them, and we'll give them the vaccinations or whatever to make sure they don't get any.
I've seen that funding. I've seen that myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and let me tell you something. She went and dug up the pieces and put them on the step and when we saw her, I could feel her saying, "Help me, help me put her back together," and that it was just gut wrenching, but I could feel the pain. You know what I mean? And you just knew what she was feeling.
I have watched elephants paint themselves with, using their trunk with a paintbrush in it and doing oil, painting themselves and showing a awareness of self in the way someone else would see them, quite more evolved than ourselves. And of course, the interviews with gorilla to suggest that they believe in something more than man, they have soul. Whether it's like ours or not, I'm not even going to present that argument because I don't know. What I do know is I don't have the right to make a judgment, and I'm in more of a sustainability of trying to get along. I'm reminded of that very funny scene in Mars Attacks when the president, steps over his dead secret security guy and he goes up to the alien and he says, "Why can't we all just get along?" And the alien has a little tear in his eye and then hands out his hand to shake his hand and then giggles. We're up against something that is distracting us. And we need to keep our eye on the ball, the idea of what's really important to you. And so your empath that you were describing of self, in fact, you can place your consciousness into another mammal and sense its feelings. That is a gift. That is part of your joy. And there you are. You should keep a diary on this kind of stuff. It's good stuff. And there's a way that you'll probably come even closer to how that all works. Cats are kind of a creepy culture altogether, however. Well, I had a mountain lion that was on my property, lived when I was up in the Okanagan.
Oh, man, let me tell you something.
They'd come down to the river every 4 o'clock in the morning for a drink. And
I would love that, man. I'll tell you what. I mean, I used to be a dog person. I'll be honest with you. I used to be a dog person. Always was. I hated cats. And I could never understand, but I met, my wife, and she for the life of her can't figure out how anybody could hate a cat. And, I was kind of skeptical at first. Well, I got my first cat. Let me tell you something. Dogs are about, boy, are they dumb. They're stupid. Dumb.
I have a thing for you. So in your life, at some point, you want to go visit Geyserville, California, and a place called Isis Oasis.
Whoa, hey, Isis Oasis?
ISIS?
A big cat Lori, I did an interview with her for not High Times. It was Rolling Stone. I interviewed her. I was a writer for Rolling Stone for a while. And when, I was a magician in Tom Wolfe's books. Did you know that?
I did not.
Yeah, nobody does. I remember a physicist that was into the martial arts that Ken and Frank Kesey were all into. Hello, I live here in Grants Pass. Frank is still alive up in Springfield. And the bus that used to be stuck out, and I'm that guy. I was the magician. Cats are part of our archetypal memory. And what you're touching is a conduit inside you that's close to some of your joy. You should explore it more. This Isis Oasis is the real deal. I don't know if Lorianne is still walking around. She's old. I saw her initiation in England in the 1950s. So when I was a child. And I got to know her. She's out in Geyserville, California, in Isis Oasis. All the bed and breakfasts are based on the tarot cards. And she has big cats.
Really?
Yeah. She does feral that breed large, certain kinds of house cats with feral, with, tigers, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah, well,
I love. Can I tell you something, Doc? My favorite's the serval. I would love to have like a serval. You know, somebody a big cat like that. Oh,
look her up on the internet. Get involved with her. That's Lorian with Isis Oasis. And there's actually there's some old video out in witchcraft about when she was initiated to start this temple in the United States. It's actually England. It's part of the Andasyrian Gardnerian lineage thing. Anyway, yeah, I just thought I would mess with you on the cat thing.
No, that's great. I mean, yeah. I love that stuff. We got to do this again. We're almost out of time, Doc. So
you do your duration of your consciousness. That is what time is. That's Robert Ornstein, Psychology of Consciousness.
And I've heard it said as well that geometric shapes are quite important when it comes to time travel as well. Is that? Would you like to talk on that?
Hey, Doc. Before you get into that, I just want to put out, folks, that if you go to richardallenmiller.com, you can check out everything that the Doc has to offer. You can check out his books, and also buy the books right there on the website. So make sure you go there, check it out. If you're interested in what you hear today, and believe me, we're just getting started.
And I must apologise because I actually forgot we were in a show there. I'm pestering the Doc. I'm interrogating him here. And then actually seen, we're live, Doc. I apologize,
and that's great.
Man.
But seriously, folks, make sure you go to richardallenmiller.com. Check it out. There's so much information on there. Unbelievable. But yeah.
Something like that. That's pretty much, I can't explain to you the difference between your words and mine, but that's accurate in a sense of knowing the flow, where I'm no longer struggling. It is being given as a gift.
Well, I'd like to picture it as, even if we're on a river, you've somehow managed to jump forward in the river and then sailed back up it. And on the way back up to where you are just now, you've gathered all that information and it's just there for you to recall. But again,
that's seemingly what my eidetic memory is about. And I'm able to connect dots, wonderfully now. However, one of the things I have absolutely also discovered is connecting dots is arbitrary. That's 5 space. That's where that goes. That's what that part is about. It's the way you time travel is the sum total.
You see, I could say possibly that's even why whoever built this construct actually built it. Maybe joy and love are things that we can't experience outside of this simulation.
My joy right now, giving you a metaphor, so I can try to give it to you the way it's appearing for me, is to watch projects that I started 40 years ago, construct of a book or a concept of something or other, and then 40 years later watching a closure on it, where there's the book. The power tools and things like that, I did 35, almost 40 years ago. ESP was 40 years ago. I used to teach courses on that. A book just only came out. Imagine the fact that, like right now, I did 4 books this last year. I have 10 new books ready for press, and I haven't even begun to show you what I've got.
And Doc, this is going to sound absolutely insane, but with you having had a glimpse so far down your own future path, do you then come back with these books already written in your memory?
The other part, there is a thing called the different forms of joy. We talked about love. Earlier in my life, I talked about the Greek had 4 different ways of levels of relationship of what love was. You had your eros, philo, agape, and telema or thelema, the love of will. Now, with that said, the same thing occurs in joy and bliss states. We have happy, and then we have bliss, which is usually achieved through meditation and achieving certain brain states where the brain bifurcates into a pattern form that allows bliss states. That's Persinger's work. And then we have the next level, which is joy. Now, joy is going to be your barter chip. That is your joy is what you have to barter in the human race that no one else has got. And that's what makes you valuable as part of.
Well, I've heard it been described as some scientists even say that we could be living in a computer simulation. And with this X factor that you're talking about, Doc, that we can't explain, is that a possibility in your opinion?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, I've seen those arguments on we're living in a matrix, a holographic universe where we're, a bunch of batteries laying out in a big warehouse, with so much power coming out of each body, electromagnetics, whatever. That part is probably true. On